The internet. The most transformative invention in human history, and almost no one knows how it was actually born. Right now, over 5 billion people are connected to a single invisible network. They stream music, send messages, run businesses, fall in love, and start revolutions, all through something most of them have never thought twice about. The internet is so woven into daily life that imagining a world without it feels impossible. But there was a world without it. And the story of how we got from that world to this one is stranger, more accidental, and more human than you might think. It begins not with Silicon Valley, not with a garage, not with a genius entrepreneur. It begins with the Cold War and with the very real fear that the world was about to end. The year is 1957. The Soviet Union has just launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, into orbit. Americans watched a tiny blinking light cross the night sky and felt something they had rarely felt before: vulnerability. If the Soviets could put a satellite in space, they could put a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. The United States scrambled to respond. One of the answers was a new agency, ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, tasked with making sure America would never again be caught off guard by technology. ARPA began funding research into computing. At the time, computers were enormous, expensive machines, each one isolated, unable to communicate with any other. Universities had them. Military labs had them. But if you wanted to share data between two computers, you physically carried it. The idea of connecting them, of building a network, seemed absurd. Then, in 1962, a man named J.C.R. Licklider wrote a series of memos about something he called the Intergalactic Computer Network. He imagined a world where computers everywhere would be interconnected, where anyone could access data from anywhere. His colleagues thought he was dreaming. He was not dreaming. He was describing the future. Licklider became the first head of ARPA's computer research program, and he hired people who shared his vision. One of those people was a young researcher named Lawrence Roberts. Roberts, working with a colleague named Thomas Merrill, ran one of the first experiments in connecting two computers over a telephone line in 1965. It worked, barely and slowly, but it worked. The next challenge was deeper. How do you build a network that cannot be destroyed? Traditional communication systems were centralized. One hub, many spokes. Cut the hub, and everything goes dark. What ARPA needed was a network with no center. A network where information could find its own path, even if parts of it were destroyed. The answer came from two researchers working independently on opposite sides of the Atlantic. In the United States, Paul Barron. In the United Kingdom, Donald Davies. Neither knew about the other. Both arrived at nearly the same idea. They called it packet switching. Instead of sending a message as a single stream, like a phone call where a dedicated line is held open, you break the message into small chunks or packets. Each packet travels independently through the network, taking whatever route is available. They might take completely different paths. They arrive at the destination and reassemble into the original message. If part of the network is destroyed, the packets simply route around the damage. The network heals itself. This idea was radical. It was also exactly right. In 1969, ARPA built the first working version of this network. They called it ARPANET. It connected 4 computers, one at UCLA, one at Stanford Research Institute, one at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and one at the University of Utah. The first message ever sent over ARPANET was supposed to be the word login. The system crashed after 2 letters. The very first message transmitted across the network was low, an accident, a fragment. And yet, it traveled. Over the next decade, ARPANET grew. More universities connected. Researchers began using it not just to share computing resources, but to communicate. An unexpected thing happened. People started using it to send messages to each other. In 1971, a programmer named Ray Tomlinson sent the first email. He chose the @ symbol, the little sign that had been sitting unused on keyboards for years, to separate the user's name from the machine's name. He sent a message to himself. He cannot remember what it said. He says it was probably something like the letters across the email became the killer application of early networking. Researchers who had signed up to share computing power found themselves spending most of their time reading and writing messages. The network was becoming something no one had planned. It was becoming a place. But ARPANET was still closed. It was a government research network. To connect, you needed to be affiliated with a university or a military contractor. The rest of the world could not access it. That changed because of a problem. As more networks appeared, each using different rules, different protocols, different languages, they could not talk to each other. A message sent from one network could not be understood by another. The networks were islands. Two researchers, Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, spent years working on this problem. In 1974, they published a paper describing a new protocol, a shared set of rules that any network could adopt. They called it the Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP. Later, they added the Internet Protocol, or IP. Together, TCP and IP became the common language of networks. A message following these rules could travel from any network to any other network, anywhere in the world. This was the birth of the Internet. Not a single network, but a network of networks. Open, decentralized, and based on a shared language that anyone could speak. Through the late 70s and 80s, more and more networks joined. Academic institutions, government agencies, international partners. The community of users was still small, tens of thousands, not millions. You needed technical knowledge to use it. There were no websites, no search engines, no images, just text moving through wires. Then, in 1989, a British scientist working at a physics laboratory in Switzerland named Tim Berners-Lee had an idea. He was frustrated. The laboratory employed thousands of researchers from dozens of countries, all working on different computers with different systems. Documents were scattered everywhere. Finding information meant asking people. Knowledge was locked in individual machines. He wanted a way to link documents together, to create a web of information that anyone could navigate. He wrote a proposal. His supervisor read it and wrote in the margin, "Vague but exciting." Berners-Lee was given the green light. Over the next 2 years, working largely alone, he invented 3 things that would change the world: a language for creating pages, an address system for locating them, and a protocol for transmitting them. He called the result the World Wide Web. On August 6, 1991, he published the world's first website. It described what the web was and how to use it. The address is still active today. Within a year, other websites appeared. Within 2 years, a young programmer at the University of Illinois named Mark Andreessen created Mosaic, the first web browser with a graphical interface. You could see images. You could click links. You did not need to know how to write code. Suddenly, the internet was not just for scientists and researchers. It was for everyone. What followed was unlike anything the world had seen. The mid-90s were a gold rush. Companies formed overnight. Investors poured money into anything with a .com in the name. Amazon launched in 1994, selling books from a garage. eBay launched in 1995. Google launched in 1998, built by 2 graduate students who had a better way to search. In the year 2000, the bubble burst. Hundreds of companies collapsed. Billions of dollars evaporated. People called it a failure. It was not a failure. It was a foundation. The companies that survived, and new ones that emerged in the aftermath, built on the infrastructure the boom had created. Broadband replaced dial-up. Millions of households connected at speeds that had been unimaginable. Then hundreds of millions. Then billions. In 2004, a college student named Mark Zuckerberg launched a social network from his dormitory room. In 2005, 3 former PayPal employees created YouTube. In 2007, a company that made computers announced a phone with no buttons, just a glass screen connected to the internet. Within a decade, over 3 billion people carried one in their pocket. The internet had gone from 4 computers in 1969 to a global network connecting more than half the human population. It had absorbed commerce, communication, entertainment, politics, education, and art. It had given a voice to people who had never had one. It had toppled governments and built fortunes. It had spread misinformation and enabled revolutions. It had made the world smaller, louder, faster, and stranger. And it had all begun with a signal, a fear, and a fragment of a word transmitted across a wire in the middle of the night. If this video gave you something, a new perspective, a story you didn't know, consider sharing it with someone. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. There are many more to tell.